Are you tired of being a prisoner to your own emotions? Do you find yourself constantly chasing pleasant moments while desperately trying to escape uncomfortable ones? If you've ever felt trapped in an endless cycle of seeking and avoiding, grasping and resisting, then you're experiencing one of humanity's most pervasive yet invisible prisons. Today, we're going to explore how to break free from this exhausting dance of duality and discover the profound peace that lies beyond the reach of any emotional storm. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand not just how to observe your experiences differently, but how to step into a dimension of being where the very foundation of suffering dissolves. There exists a subtle trap that most human beings fail to recognize. We habitually stop at the feeling of experience, rather than looking through to its essential nature. When a pleasant moment arrives, we cling to it as if it were the ultimate reward. When an uncomfortable moment appears, we seek every possible way to escape from it. In both cases, we remain bound by the same thread, the identification of ourselves with what is being experienced. These emotions, like joy or fear, are merely ripples on the lake of consciousness. They're not the lake itself. But if we only look at those ripples, the mind becomes hypnotized, losing the ability to recognize the quiet depth beneath. Every action arising from clinging or avoidance feeds a new vortex of seeking and resistance. When we ask the question, who is the one experiencing this? We take a very different step from our reflexive habits. We no longer concern ourselves with the story of the emotion, but turn back to find the source of the very one who is experiencing. This inquiry is like a blade cutting through the fog of the mind, until both the questioner and the emotion dissolve into a vaster foundation. This doesn't mean denying or fighting against the feeling. On the contrary, it requires complete permission, allowing the moment to be itself, but not allowing ourselves to be defined by it. Joy doesn't need to be grasped. Fear doesn't need to be chased away. When there's no longer any effort to protect or eliminate, both will naturally retreat into emptiness, like waves dissolving back into the ocean. The crucial point doesn't lie in replacing negative emotions with positive ones, but in stepping out of the entire game of opposites. This is when all concepts of I and my experience dissolve. At that point, there's no one left to be afraid and no one left to enjoy. Only pure presence remains, unchopped by thought and time. The cessation of duality is not a special emotional state, nor is it numbness or soulless emptiness. It is wholeness of life, undivided, unclouded by the masks of desire and anxiety. All experiences can still come and go, but they no longer have the power to shape identity. When this is seen clearly, the journey of seeking ends. No more chasing perfect moments or battling unwanted ones. No more need for a destination, because right in this moment, truth is already complete. And within this completeness, everything continues to unfold. The sound of wind blowing, the heartbeat, footsteps on the ground, but there's no one left to cling or resist. Only life operating itself, knowing itself, complete in itself. This is when reality is no longer colored by the judgments and stories of the mind. Joy and fear become merely small waves, arising and disappearing on the boundless ocean of awareness. And that ocean, never contaminated by any ripple, is what was there before any experience appeared and remains there after all experiences have passed. If you stop and become silent, you will see that it has never been absent. To truly understand this shift from duality to non-dual awareness, we must examine how deeply embedded we are in the habit of identification. From the moment we wake up each morning, the mind immediately begins its familiar routine of categorizing experiences into desirable and undesirable, pleasant and unpleasant, acceptable and unacceptable. This automatic sorting mechanism operates so quickly and seamlessly that we rarely question its validity or necessity. We assume that this constant evaluation is not only natural, but essential for our survival and well-being. Yet this very mechanism is what keeps us trapped in the endless cycle of seeking and avoiding that characterizes most human experience. Consider how this plays out in daily life. You wake up and immediately check your phone. If there are positive messages, your mood lifts. If there are stressful emails, anxiety begins to creep in. Already, within minutes of waking, you've handed over your inner state to external circumstances. The mind has engaged its binary processing system, and you've unconsciously agreed to let your sense of well-being depend on factors completely outside your control. This pattern repeats throughout the day in countless subtle ways. The weather is either good or bad for your mood. Traffic is either flowing smoothly or causing frustration. Conversations with others either energize you or drain you. Each interaction becomes another opportunity for the mind to sort reality into categories of preference. But what if this entire sorting system is not only unnecessary, but actually the source of our suffering? What if the very act of labeling experiences as good or bad, wanted or unwanted, is what creates the prison we're trying to escape from? This is where the inquiry, who is experiencing this, becomes revolutionary. Instead of engaging with the content of experience, we turn our attention to the experiencer itself. Instead of trying to change what we're feeling, we investigate who or what is doing the feeling. This shift in attention is subtle but profound. It's like switching from being absorbed in a movie to becoming curious about the screen on which the movie is playing. The movie continues, but your relationship to it fundamentally changes. You're no longer lost in the drama, no longer identified with the characters, no longer emotionally hijacked by the plot. You begin to recognize that you are the unchanging awareness in which all experiences arise and pass away. The practice of this inquiry requires patience and persistence because the mind's habit of identification runs incredibly deep. We've been practicing it unconsciously for so long that it feels like our natural state. The thought, "I am angry," seems obviously true when anger is present. The thought, "I am happy," seems equally valid when joy arises. But both statements contain the same fundamental error. They assume that you are identical to whatever temporary state is currently appearing in your awareness. To begin loosening this identification, start by introducing a small gap between yourself and your experiences. Instead of "I am angry," try "anger is present." Instead of "I am worried," notice worry is arising. This simple linguistic shift begins to create space between the observer and the observed, between awareness and its contents. It's a gentle way of beginning to question the assumption that you are what you experience. As you continue this practice, you may notice something remarkable. The experiences themselves begin to lose their grip on you. When you stop feeding them with identification, they naturally begin to subside. Anger that isn't claimed as mine tends to dissipate more quickly. Joy that isn't grasped at doesn't turn into attachment and the inevitable disappointment when it fades. Fear that isn't resisted doesn't build up into panic or anxiety. The experiences continue to arise. This is natural and unavoidable, but they no longer have the power to define or disturb your essential nature. This is where many spiritual teachings can become misleading. They often suggest that the goal is to eliminate negative emotions and cultivate positive ones. They promise techniques for managing your inner state, for becoming more peaceful, more joyful, more loving. While these approaches may provide temporary relief, They ultimately reinforce the very duality they claim to transcend. They keep you trapped in the game of seeking better experiences and avoiding worse ones. They maintain the illusion that your well-being depends on the content of your experience rather than recognizing your true nature as the unchanging awareness in which all content appears. The path we're exploring here is more radical. It's not about improving your experiences, but about recognizing that you're not your experiences at all. It's not about becoming a better person, but about discovering that the person you think you are is itself just another appearance in awareness. This recognition doesn't make you cold or detached. On the contrary, it reveals a warmth and intimacy that was always present, but obscured by the constant activity of seeking and avoiding. When identification with experience begins to loosen, something beautiful starts to emerge. Life becomes much simpler. You no longer need to manage your inner state because you realize there's nothing to manage. You no longer need to protect yourself from difficult emotions because you see that they can't actually harm what you truly are. You no longer need to chase after pleasant experiences because you recognize that your essential nature is already complete and fulfilled. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. Actions still arise, preferences still exist, responses still occur, but they emerge from a different source. Not from the desperate need to maintain a particular self-image or to avoid uncomfortable feelings, but from the natural intelligence of life itself. When you're no longer defending a false sense of self, your responses become more spontaneous, more appropriate, more loving. You act not from fear or desire, but from clarity and compassion. The inquiry, who is experiencing this, is not meant to be answered intellectually. It's not a riddle to be solved by the thinking mind. In fact, the thinking mind cannot answer this question because the thinking mind is itself part of what's being experienced. The question is more like a pointer, directing attention back to its source. When you sincerely ask, "Who am I?" or "Who is aware of this thought?" or "Who is feeling this emotion?" you're invited to look in a direction that the mind cannot go. What you find when you look in this direction is not another object of experience. You don't discover a self hiding somewhere behind your thoughts and feelings. Instead, you find the very capacity to be aware, pure, open, empty awareness itself. This awareness has no qualities, no characteristics, no boundaries. It's not personal or impersonal, not individual or universal. These are all concepts that arise within awareness. Awareness itself is prior to all concepts, including the concept of awareness. This recognition is not a special state that comes and goes. It's not an experience that you can have and then lose. It's the ever-present reality that you are, regardless of what's appearing in your experience. Whether you're feeling joyful or sorrowful, calm or agitated, confident or insecure, the awareness in which these feelings appear remains unchanged. It's like space. No matter what objects appear in space, space itself is never affected by them. Recognizing yourself as this unchanging awareness doesn't eliminate the world of experience. Thoughts still arise, emotions still flow, sensations still appear, but your relationship to them is transformed. They're no longer problems to be solved or states to be maintained. They're simply the natural play of consciousness, arising and passing away in the space of your being like clouds moving across the sky. This shift in understanding has practical implications for how you navigate daily life. When challenging situations arise, instead of immediately trying to fix or escape them, you can pause and ask, "Who is experiencing this difficulty?" This simple question can instantly create space around the problem, revealing that you're not actually threatened by it. The situation may still require practical action, but the action arises from clarity rather than reactivity. Similarly, When pleasant experiences occur, instead of grasping at them or trying to make them permanent, you can enjoy them fully while recognizing that they're temporary expressions of the same awareness that remains when they fade. This allows for a deeper appreciation of life's beauty without the underlying anxiety that comes from knowing that all pleasant experiences must eventually end. The practice of stepping out of the duality game is not about achieving a particular state or reaching a specific destination. It's about recognizing what's already here, what's always been here, what could never not be here. It's about seeing through the illusion of separation between the experiencer and the experienced, between awareness and its contents, between yourself and life itself. And as this recognition deepens, the very notion of a spiritual path begins to dissolve. There's nowhere to go because you're already here. There's nothing to achieve because you already are what you're seeking. There's no one to become because what you truly are has never been born and will never die. This is not a philosophical position or belief system. It's the direct recognition of your own true nature. The beauty of this understanding is that it's available right now, in this very moment. You don't need years of meditation or study. You don't need to change anything about yourself or your circumstances. You simply need to stop, look, and see what's already here. The awareness reading these words, the consciousness in which these thoughts are appearing, the being that you are, this is what we're pointing to. This is what has never been absent, what needs no improvement, what is already free. In this recognition, the search ends not because you found what you were looking for, but because you realize you were never actually lost. The peace you've been seeking was never hidden. The love you've been craving was never absent. The freedom you've been pursuing was never bound. All of it is here, now, as the very fabric of your being. When you see this clearly, everything changes and yet nothing changes. Life continues to unfold in all its messy, beautiful complexity, but you're no longer at war with it. You're no longer trying to make it different than it is. You're simply here, present, aware, complete. This is the end of seeking and the beginning of being. This is stepping out of the duality game and into the wholeness that you are. This is coming home to yourself, not as a person with a history and a future, but as the timeless awareness in which all stories arise and pass away. And in this homecoming, you discover that you never actually left. You were always here, always whole, always free. You just forgot for a while, lost in the fascinating play of experience. But now you remember, and in remembering, you are free.